welcome to the Atlantic Council.
Great pleasure to be here.
I'm going to do in Latin America, and they slowly move their way. I'm like, frustrated as the mix from content to.
Let me, at the very onset, thank the Atlantic Council for putting together this forum in order to allow me an opportunity to have a conversation with you. Indeed, by the time I finish my very short remarks, my hope is that I will have been able to argue effectively that Africa has immense strategic importance to the security and prosperity of the transatlantic alliance, and that the Atlantic Council, which was founded basically on the premise of advancing that transatlantic alliance. Indeed, let me say that from the very onset, I have with us Ambassador Martin Kimani here, who is an officer in our government, similar to Peter here, who at one time or another was with the Council and now work with governments. I don't know what they prefer, but we do know that you have the capacity to produce great thinkers and indeed great actors. Ladies and gentlemen, this think tank came into being to consolidate the peace following the World War II. And 2 years after the founding of Kenya, we attained our independence from the British. Our struggle and the World War both played a part in weakening the colonial enterprise, and Kenyans, and indeed many Africans, are fully aware of the position that the United States took with the freedom-loving people of the African continent. Our struggle for independence occurred in lock and step with your country's campaign for full civil rights for your citizens. And in the end, we won our freedom, and you in the United States advanced your democracy. Those early years of our independent life also brought us very close to the United States, with people like Thurgood Marshall, who helped us write our very first independence constitution. We had Barack Obama's father, who left our shores supported by American benefactors to pursue knowledge, and ended up gaining it, but on top of it, gaining a son who would one day be the President of the United States. Kenya looked to the United States for democracy and to build the prosperity that we needed to combat poverty, disease, and ignorance. And indeed, much was achieved. However, as the 60s progressed and your Cold War with the Soviet Union escalated, our region became a proxy ground for that conflict. The Cold War led to many hot wars, revolutions, and coups in our region and in the African continent. We in Kenya tried to chart a careful path between two battling giants, but it was very difficult and in many ways affected our politics and our stability across the African continent. Truth be told, that democracy retreated in many parts of Africa, and an authoritarianism arose that exploited the Cold War to entrench itself. Our leaders failed to succeed in building strong economies, and we watched as Asian countries that had started off poorer than some of us became rich in less than 2 generations. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am returning to this history because I believe we must never again be drawn into the mistakes that have been made in the past. You here at the Atlantic Council and your audience must integrate our place in your strategic schemes as more than just a continent producing security threats or unregulated migration that must be countered. We must begin to look at Africa as the world's biggest opportunity. And I believe that if you can dare to look at it with a fresh eye and with a keen sense of history, we can achieve this. And my presence here today is to say that Kenya can be a key country in converting that opportunity into mutual gain. Indeed, I've noticed in the conversations in Western countries and their counterparts in Asia and the Middle East a return to competition over Africa. In some cases, weaponizing divisions, pursuing proxy actions, and behaving like Africa is for the taking. Well, I want to tell you it is not. If you understand the opportunity, I believe you will seek to grow strong partnerships driven by collaborative and generous principles. Very much like the values that guided the United States' engagement with Europe after World War II. To grasp this opportunity, you will need to listen and engage with what we in Africa want and what we in Africa need. Let me try to match your opportunity to ours in just 2 very few standout areas, namely prosperity and security. The first is that there is a lot of capital in the United States and Europe that is seeking greater yield in developing markets with aging populations. Who will find the growth? Who will fund the growth that these citizens will need when retirement comes after a lifetime of hard work, and who are keen to enjoy their retirement years? On the flip side of the coin, you have Africa that has the world's youngest and fastest growing population. On top of that, the most unexploited land for agriculture, immense mineral wealth, and a large consumer market. I believe we must tap into these assets to create decent jobs for millions of our young people. We must become wealthy enough as countries to provide the health, education, and security that will sustain democracy, stability, and strong public support for business and free trade. Ladies and gentlemen, Africans are not standing still. We are integrating. In our region, East Africa, but more so, the Continental Free Trade Agreement that I believe will be a game changer. Today, there is a marked desire among a good number of my fellow African leaders to seek decisive change in how Africa engages the world. We want partners who are walking in the same direction as we are. Kenya is moving aggressively to bring our infrastructure up to date. Our population in Kenya is probably amongst the best educated in the region and arguably in the African continent. We are today making big investments in building technical skills, attacking corruption, lowering barriers to doing business, and stabilizing our democratic politics. We are not just a gateway. We are a platform of skills, entrepreneurship, stability, and the rule of law. And that is why I am greatly looking forward to making early and an ambitious start to arrangements for the foreseen end of the AGOA program in the year 2025. And I hope that all of you will support a process that shows how long-term mutual benefit can deliver in a way that clearly supports Africa's integration and prosperity agenda. Indeed, it is early days, but I strongly believe that we have an opportunity to show the way forward, together as Kenya and the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, the second area is in protecting the security of our peoples. We have a lot of young people. They see on their social media what your youth see here. They listen to the same music, aspire to the very same consumption. Your young people here have almost full employment with which to satisfy their desires and their ambitions. Millions of ours are unemployed and unable to match their expectations. It is an unsustainable situation, and if this reality does not change quickly, we will produce in Africa many security crises that will leave no corner of this globe untouched. There are also ideological extremists opposed deeply to democracy, the West, unity across ethnic, religious, and racial barriers. Alongside these, there are criminals that operate across boundaries, ready to traffic our youth, no matter what barriers are erected against the flow. The extremists, militants, and criminals are already uniting to seriously challenge the continuity of states in many parts of Africa and the world. We, together, will never realize the immense wealth we can build together or hope to hold on the little that we have if African states remain relatively weak and vulnerable to these destructive actors. The secure and rules-based global order that can assure your security and prosperity has to be built on a patchwork of effective, stable, and secure states governed in an inclusive and participatory manner. Your aid programs and development programs and norm must promote and must do more to support stronger states and not to unintentionally dovetail with destabilizing factors. You will also advance your own interests if again you listen to Africans more keenly, resist being drawn into proxy struggles with other global powers, and genuinely work with these countries or with those countries that are determined to emerge as African lions in the next few years. You can also make your financial centers and institutions inhospitable to illegal and illicit financial flows out of Africa. This is a major reason that Kenya has been signing agreements with countries to ensure that the corrupt do not easily transfer their ill-gotten wealth abroad. A crucial role that you can play is ensuring that regional and international terrorist groups do not hold any territory in Africa. As has been observed, they can start in one country but have a tendency to mutate across borders and indeed become very destructive. A good start to this is Al-Shabaab. We must continue to work together as Kenya and the United States, together with other regional players, to surge our military efforts against the group, to offer room for a workable political consensus in Somalia. This group's ability to raise finances through contraband and its penetration of businesses and even public sector bodies in Somalia must be challenged at every turn. We are already ramping up an aggressive posture against contraband in our country. The effort to defeat the group would be helped immensely by compliance to countering terrorism financing, fighting money laundering, and other international obligations against terrorism are observed. Regionally, and in Somalia specifically, where the core of the challenge exists, institutions like the Atlantic Council can do a lot to push against agendas that insist democracy is a one-size-fits-all outfit that ends up deeply undermining the sustained strengthening of democracy. I want to be clear here, and please, all of you note that I do not mean we should agree that authoritarian or dictatorial regimes that announce themselves should be taken at their word. The point is that we must give countries the room to engineer new approaches that support and extend democracy in line with their respective realities. It requires being more nuanced in how we make judgments about politics and the resulting interventions that countries like the United States should undertake. In Kenya, for example, political, social, and governance engineering is what we are embarking on in Kenya with our Building Bridges initiative. I will discuss it more at the National Prayer Breakfast Luncheon later this afternoon, and indeed I do hope that some of you will be in attendance. In a nutshell, the Building Bridges initiative, as we call it in Kenya, is a homegrown solution for a divisive political culture that has often sparked electoral crises over the last 30 years. And its intention is to advance three goals. The first, to preempt any further escalation in the cycle of no-holds-barred political competition by taking early and decisive action to reach out across the aisle. I did this with the Honorable Raila Odinga in March of 2018, at a time when few in Kenya or anywhere imagined that this was possible. The second is to use inclusivity to strengthen the center of politics, which is necessary for democracy in our country to be successful. That center is identified by being able to manifest the qualities of moderation, pragmatism, and a willingness to compromise. Our stepping forward toward one another without doubt has helped us disorient the politics of extremism and division. The third is to ensure that the strengthened and more stable center is able to deliver bold reforms that advance inclusion, economic uplift, counters corruption, and strengthens our institutions. So, as a think tank, I believe that you as a council should delve deeper into our Building Bridges initiative process It is not as simple as it looks, and we have found a number of countries seeking to learn from it in trying to re-engineer their politics and social contracts. We have been open in sharing, and in time, I believe that this may emerge as a unique model that can be adopted and domesticated elsewhere on the African continent. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I believe that the United States must dare to imagine and support African-driven solutions. We, together, have the most to gain in making Africa work for its people.